Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology. What could be more fascinating than the subject of astrology? I personally believe that astrology is going to become more prevalent in your lifetimes, all of you who are listening, than it ever has in the past. Because as time goes on, we gather more information, we have more empirical data, the relevancy and the accuracy becomes even more precise. So put that in the back of your head somewhere. Before we get started with my guest, I want to remind you about my weekly newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon at 1:30. In that newsletter, you'll find two paragraphs roughly of the mundane astrology for the week to come, and then I break it out into the individual signs. I encourage you to read your sun sign, just because it's always fun to do that, and read your rising sign together. And put the two together into a nice sandwich. Maybe throw the moon in there as well, if you know that, which you should. And then you'll get a nice sandwich. That will be what's happening in your week to come. I'm not going to tell you to buy a lottery ticket on Thursday, but if money's in your life coming up, who knows how it could manifest. So keep that in the back of your mind. Anyway, without further ado, I want to get my next guest on. Matter Currie is calling today from Calgary, Canada, a town that is near and dear to my heart. I had a honeymoon there many, many moons ago, and he's calling today, and we're going to be talking about how to play nicely with others. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hey, Chris. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, I've been meaning to connect with you for a long time, so I'm glad we finally got the opportunity to. So, playing nicely with others. You and I know how to play nicely because we know if we have somebody who's the opposite of us, we're going to, there's an odds we're going to get along. So, yeah. How do you think about all this?
Here's the thing. I think any astrologer, ends up dealing a lot with relationship stuff. I know certainly I get that sort of thing all the time.
All the time, yeah.
All the time. And, astrology can do a lot of things, but it keeps coming back to the basics.
Right.
And human relations appear to be the most basic of it. And, here's the thing. I think all else being equal, you can get a lot of relationship advice from a lot of places. Some more useful than others. But two things. First of all, when you go to an astrologer, they've got the birth chart there, and you can kind of see mechanically where that clunking noise is coming from, whereas other people might not.
Yep.
And secondly, just for me personally, when it comes to getting relationship advice from me, it's did you ever take shop class in high school?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You could get the safety lecture from the regular teacher, or you could get the safety lecture from the shop teacher who's missing a couple of fingers. And it seems to me that the guy who got lazy with it and didn't unplug the bandsaw that one day knows what he's talking about more. And I think that's what I bring to the table with relationship astrology.
I think the same thing. I feel very much the same way. I've got a lot of mileage in the old relationship category, and having that many relationships, I think, gives you a really good foundation of what works and what doesn't work. I know signs that I get along with better than others, but I would not just generalize it based on the sign. I would say when you see the chart, you know if a person's got what you want or not, or whatever. It's very, very accurate.
Well, yeah, and anyone who's got any experience with astrology knows it goes a lot deeper than just the sun signs.
Of course, of course.
Like for example, I'm a Sagittarius. Pray for me. I'm a Sagittarius, but I happen to be madly in love with a double Scorpio. And if you go to the standard sun sign guidebook, they'll be saying,
"Don't do it."
What's with this? What are you thinking? Yeah. But it works out quite nicely.
Yeah, so there is a magic to it, and there's an aspect in there that you haven't probably discovered yet. Interestingly enough, I'm an Aries, and I have always been involved with Scorpios. Almost the longest relationship I've had in my life, and the most relationships I've had in my life, have been with Scorpios. And it's got to be that Mars thing.
That's my theory, is that there's the Mars connection, and that when you get right down to it, Mars likes a challenge, so it's natural that Aries and Scorpio, they'll team up.
Yeah, and I think that part of what I've discovered over the course of my life with these Scorpio relationships, me being an Aries, is that the conflict actually is very, very healthy as long as it doesn't get out of hand. Now,
Yeah.
no one's pulling knives out of the drawer and stuff like that, but I'm saying as long as you can keep it within range of logical, discourse, then you have a good chance of having a very stimulating conversation, which I think actually deepens any relationship. It's always about the experience and how much you are allowed, how much you want to show to somebody that makes that connection even deeper.
Yeah, and let's be honest here. You get close enough to any human being, the wheels will fall off the wagon occasionally. And, the astrology helps you understand where, when, and how that might hit, too.
I've always held the contention that astrology is the great tolerance tool because if somebody's born a certain way, they really can't help it. That's always a great excuse.
Yeah. it's sometimes astrology is an excuse. Sometimes it's a good, firm guideline. Yeah.
Yeah, it does work. And you can know, I think that if you, any relationship, I've found that if you have a strong Mars-Venus connection, be it via trine or square, you're going to get some action in there that can be very, very powerful and very, passionate, and that can carry it. But I think I would have to argue. I'd say that passion only lasts so long. I mean, I'm not saying this in a way. I'm saying what ultimately is what keeps people together. I firmly believe is the friendship factor at the bottom, at the end of the day.
Yeah. When you get right down to it, if at the end of the day you still realize the other person is still on side and still on your team, that does wonders.
It does, and I think that's a valuable component. Oftentimes, people I think fall in love, get very swept away with the passion, which may be great. It's a great feature of any new relationship. But after 3 or 4 or 5 years, whatever, and that begins to dwindle, do you like the person? That's why so many people, I think, in the United States especially, get divorced. Maybe the rest of the world as well. Some people don't even bother getting married, which might not be the worst idea. But the fact that so many people hit that spot where they just say, they wake up, it's just not what they thought, and they're out of there.
Well, yeah. And when it comes to just friendship and mutual understanding, they don't make a pill for that,
They don't.
Not once will you ever see an ad on TV that says, if your mutual interests last longer than 4 hours, please seek immediate medical attention.
That's a great, yeah, that is very good. You don't see that on TV. You don't. You're right. Very good point. But I think that, when I mention getting back to the idea of tolerance, I think that this is one of the gems, the jewels of the astrology, sort of lexicon, is the fact that we can tap into this idea, well, so-and-so is so-and-so. And if you understand the language and the complexity, which is very complex, I'm not going to discount that. It's very complicated. But when you see the angles and the complexity that's there, I think it does provide a platform for tolerance.
Yeah. And let's be honest here. There are some people out there who, because, I don't know, maybe they're bad people or something, who love to go around picking on certain signs or certain placements or whatever. I had this theory once that with a lot of the astrology books you read, you can tell whoever wrote it, you can tell whoever their last breakup was with.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Okay, Aries, you're fun and energetic. Taurus, you're loving and stable. Gemini, you're talkative and communicative. Cancer, you're a horrible person.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're just intense. And before anybody gets offended out there, remember that we are astrologers. I love every sign in the whole goddamn wheel. So don't worry about that. We just have our little inside jokes, which are, sometimes they're pretty accurate,
Yeah.
If you get nipped by a crab, a Cancer crab, you're going to know. So.
Oh yeah.
And I've been nipped, so.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And here's the thing. I mean, of course, people are more complex than just their sun sign. I'm a Sagittarius with moon in Cancer, so I nip myself plenty.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. I do actually think that in some ways it hardens you to the realities that you're facing. I think that's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
I find it to be very helpful. I think, I've always said that wherever I enjoy the squares. That sounds like I'm a sadist, and it may very well be. I've got Saturn in my first house, but
or you're an Aries and you just enjoy the challenge.
I just enjoy the challenge. Either way, I'm looking forward to the coming week for sure. I think it's going to be a vibrant time. But I do think that within any sense, any time that you have a tense or potentially intense situation, the potential exists in that intense situation to be equally as positive as negative. That's my theory. And I think that we have free will in determining which way that may go.
Well, and I think when it comes to the idea of the tense aspects are what really makes a relationship work. Is that if you think about it, I mean, a lot of our lives consist of the stories we're telling ourselves.
Right.
What's a great story? You have this farm boy on some distant planet, but then his aunt and uncle get killed, and then he ends up on a spaceship on this giant thing, and some horrible things happen, and there's a fight, and someone else gets killed, and he jumps into a fighter, and he blows up. Great stories like that. I should write. Oh, I think that one's been done. Anyway, but it was sort of like if we have, there's some boring farm boy on a boring planet, and he spends 90 minutes raking the sand and talking to a droid. That's not a movie you'd watch more than once.
Probably not.
And I think if you apply the same principle to relationships, a little drama gets your attention.
Well, I think it's part of the human condition. Familiarity breeds contempt, as they say. And very much accurate. I think that's probably true for anybody in your life, regardless of what the relationship may be. You spend too much time with anybody, you're going to get tired of them. But and that's true, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's part of the whole beautiful wonder of what makes humanity work so well. Because I think you've got to have that duality of getting along and not getting along. I think there's a really important piece of that makes the whole thing. It's magnetics, basically, what it comes down to. You've got to have this polarity going on all the time, and we are dualistic people. Everything about our lives is dualistic. So having that back and forth is, it's a cosmic tennis match, ping pong.
Yeah. And true story. I know I have a friend of mine who's an Aquarius, and she's in a relationship with another Aquarius, and this has been going on for over 20. They've been living together for over 20 years, but never once have they lived together. They always rent out 2 rooms next to each other, or a house. One of them gets the basement, and it works.
That is a great idea. I have a friend that had the same story. She was living with somebody, and they shared 2 townhouses next to each other, and so they go across and have dinner and with each other, watch a movie. Then the other person would go home or whatever, and they'd have their own space. So having your own space is kind of really a nice thing.
It is, and it also means you don't have to endure as much snoring.
Exactly. So there's benefits all the way around, and of course they're right next door. If you need anybody, you just walk through ring the doorbell, and there you are. There's a logic to that. I think that's probably inherent with all people. I think that's maybe not necessarily an Aquarian trait. I like the idea of it myself, but I do think it's a wonderful thing. I really do.
Yeah, it's and I mean, here's the thing. It's hard enough being a human in and of yourself. And I think we're all, or almost all, compelled to find someone else to be with, whether it's in a relationship or a family or community or something like that. And you know what? I mean, I think if a person does not annoy themselves at least occasionally, they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
So it's only natural that other people will occasionally,
Well, let me ask you this. When you do annoy yourself, do you do it in a Sagittarian way?
Oh my God, it's. I have this.
That's a good question, though. It's a good question.
It is. It's a very good question. I'm a Sagittarius with Moon in Cancer, but Moon right on the ascendant.
Oh wow!
And so it's kind of like Sagittarius says something stupid, Cancer withdraws in horror
and hides in the closet.
Sagittarius tells Cancer not to be such a wuss. And then Cancer gets. It's like that, except it's all inside my own head.
Right. So you're like you have got double Cancer in your chart with it on the 2 things. Yeah. So it's a strong component of yours. But I have a Cancer moon as well, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Aries. I know. I do need help. Aries with a Cancer moon. I know. And my moon is conjunct my Uranus in Cancer. So I've got that. That's why I'm supposed to be an astrologer. That's why I am an astrologer. But anyway. And I'm a Virgo rising, so that's gives me that gift of gab. But the thing of it is that in your capacity you have that wonderful empathy. That's what you want. Empathy. Empathy comes from the water signs, I believe. It comes from the Cancers, the Scorpios. Scorpios' empathy may manifest itself as terror or jealousy, but it's there. I mean, the tendency is the propensity is there. Same is true for Pisces.
And it's like, as I was saying to a double Scorpio earlier today, is that when it comes to emotional expression, Scorpio is totally laser focused on that sort of thing. It's like that when you get that sudden thump in the chest from a
Yeah.
Scorpio, you know it's either because they love you or it's a steak knife, depending on the circumstances.
Well,
And there
so
is
far it's been good.
a certain laser-like straightforwardness about that.
Oh, yeah.
No guesswork involved, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
appreciate that.
I do too. I certainly do. There's a certain honesty that's there. And the laser focus you're talking about is intensity. There's no question. But they are very, I live with a Scorpio. They are very singularly minded. They fulfill all the characteristics we expect of Scorpio. They have the depth. They have the intensity. They've got this great ability to be research and go beyond where people will not go. So there's all these wonderful tendencies about them, and they're very loyal. It's like it's not like I'm talking about a dog. I'm not. I'm talking. No, I'm saying when I said the word loyal and that they, it sounds like then they wag their tail. No, I am not being that way at all. I'm just simply saying that there's a loyalty. Loyalty is a very, very wonderful quality in a friend or anybody you're involved with because it means they got your back. And what could be better than that?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's an interesting concept. And see, now you said that you're involved with a double Scorpio. You're a double Cancer. In some ways, that's not such a bad place to be. You've got a lot of emotional, work between you.
It works very nicely, and here's the thing: it would work really nicely even if I didn't know the astrology, even if she didn't know the astrology. But at the same time, one of the interesting benefits of the astrology is if you have one of those evenings where someone's getting all bent out of shape, you can have a quick look and say, oh, yeah, transiting moon is square your moon. How about we talk about this tomorrow?
Yeah. Okay. Let's put the pause button on. That's very. Yeah. I have gone down, and I've actually tested this both many ways, knowing that it's not a good time, can feel the tension building. Jump into the fire, because I'm an Aries, impulsive, got to do that. Jump into the fire, get burnt, run away, and then I realized, if I had just waited, a day, or maybe even 4 or 5 hours, maybe 7 hours, I would have been fine. But nope, had to jump right in.
Oh, yeah. I've often told people that I think, first of all, I think that just in general, there is far more of a general interest in astrology than any astrologer is reaching. Like, for example, every once in a while you come across an astrologer. There's bad ones. Let's be honest here. There's bad plumbers and bad accountants and bad groomers. Yeah. So, but there are astrologers who will do things like if you're doing well with readings or I'm doing well with readings, they'll get all petty and snarky and try and poach your fan base or whatever. And they don't seem to realize that there's enough interest out there that if we could just do more to stimulate it, then it would be the classic rising tide raising all the boats. And I've often thought if there's one thing that we could, as astrologers, get out to people, is if they just knew the basics of their birth chart and, if they had an app or if they looked online to find out where is the moon right now. Oh, that's why I'm cranky.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm totally behind you, and this has been my goal since I started this podcast and everything else I've done all this time. The reason I got into doing the podcast was because and the radio. I was on terrestrial radio for years. The reason I did that was because I wanted people to understand how valuable this tool is, and if they know 3 things, if nothing else, we're not asking them to memorize the periodic table. We're asking them to know 3 simple points, and you can at least understand basic astrology. You can get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and then, of course, if you get a little more advanced with your knowledge, you'll say, oh, let's see, the guy with Moon and Cancer on the Ascendant is talking about how important moon transits are. What a surprise. I swear to you, I am what is considered in modern terminology a cisgendered heterosexual male, and yet I swear to you, every 28 days, I get moody, irritable, and bloated.
You're a wet blanket.
That's the curse of Moon and Cancer on the Ascendant right there.
Well, I will say this much: having Moon in Cancer, I don't have it on the Ascendant, but I will say that I am very prone to Moon opposing Moon. That's one thing I notice very much so. I always get very melancholy in those times, and like you say, roughly about once a month. I do get very melancholy, and I can get moody, not withdrawn. I'm not really a withdrawn person, but I do find myself in doing solitary things by myself, which I pose is kind of the same thing in a way if you think about it. So.
And it's probably best for everyone because when you're going through that transit, yeah.
But you have to be, you also have, in that same process, you have to at least I do. I have this constant conversation with myself to say, get a tougher shell and, be a stronger crab. And
Yeah.
don't be so prone to, criticism. But that's the other part of me. That's the Virgo that speaks in me. So
Yeah.
Is that combination of things. But, there's a lot to be said for that strong maternal quality, because it does have a certain approachability. People find you probably very approachable, and a sense of empathy, and that's what people come to us for. They don't come to us when they've just hit the lottery. They come to us when the poop has hit the ventilator.
Yeah.
They're not happy.
And I mean, if nothing else, if you're going through something terrible in your life, there is a world of comfort to be had in looking at someone's transit, saying, "Okay, this kicked in about like 5-6 months ago, right?"
And and their head
3
starts shaking, and then they say, "How long is it going to last?" Well, you got 6 months to go.
Yeah.
Then they know. And there's a time to strike and a time to hold and a time to fold. And I think it's important that people understand that, because you can. I found myself I don't try to dwell too much on studying my own chart, because you can go really wonky with that. It's nice to touch base once in a while, just see where things are. But I think things happen at a very mechanical timing, and when I look back at them in events, I can certainly see the logic and how it worked. So this is why meeting people at certain times is important. Having all these connections work, meeting the right people at the right time, how opposites attract, how you have these common elements always in your chart. I love those things about it.
Oh yeah, and I guess humans are complicated, okay, and it's probably no surprise that astrology and the birth charts are complicated too, and getting a handle on that sort of thing does go a long way.
It does. It helps. I think it helps immensely with. I've actually had people. My biggest client base. If I looked at my clients who come to see me, and I had to pick out one occupation that is most prevalent in that demographic, which is not that large, but anyway, I'm not talking New York City. Of the clients that I have, the demographic that breaks down for occupation that is the most predominant is the psychologist.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I got to ask you about that. Do you think that's the case in general, or is there something about you or your birth chart? Because
I don't know. That's a good question, because
I have a disproportionately large number of a somewhat different line of work. But I sometimes wonder. Like, I think there's some astrologers who just naturally draw more. I mean, it's understandable that any astrologer will get psychiatrists or counselors or therapists or people who are in the so-called helping professions.
Right.
But I think above and beyond that, sometimes we find that, there are a lot of astrologers who seem to have a lot of abuse victims come to them.
Right.
Or a lot of people who are very clinical and scientific.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And
it certainly does attract that type of person. I think the reason the psychologists come is because when we have a conversation about what's going on, we're talking about real humanistic issues and how to solve problems, where to put your energy, where's Jupiter in your chart right now, what's going on with your life, where can you expand some. That's where I think the psychology piece comes in, because they see that similar kind of human connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, a lot of people can sense it even subconsciously that, this is the person I want to talk about with my screwed up career, or this is the person I want to talk about with my marriage, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. When, knowing what you can learn from this, I've always thought that, gosh, I can't wait for this to end up in high school guidance counselors, because if they understood what the person's chart was, so they could get that birth information. I mean, everybody will give their birthday for their application to high school or wherever you go to. But people are reluctant to give the time of birth. They get a little scared when you say, "Why do you want my time of birth?" But if you get it, understandable, but it's an invasion of privacy, I guess. But if you could get into those places with the and get that information, then use that as a guidance for college, for high school graduates to get into college or decide which way they want to go. My gosh, you could really shake up the world.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's a fascinating piece of it. And that's why it's where that counseling piece comes in. I think that's so real, especially when you're trying to get along with somebody.
Oh, yeah. Which is the trick sometimes.
Yeah, it's the trick, all right. It's trying to get along. But yeah, I think it's very valid to say you're going to have those good days, you're going to have those bad days. And that's just how it is. We have to play nicely with others. And I think astrology provides the perfect platform for allowing that to happen. As long as people are open to it, there's still this huge stigma attached to astrology about this sort of, oh my gosh, he's an astrologer, whatever. But by the same token, I'm sure you've had these conversations with people when you tell them what you do, but then they always know what their sign is, and they always want to know what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. It's like, oh, well, I don't really believe in tell me more about myself. Mm-hmm. No one's listening. Tell me more about myself. Okay, yeah. There is just a a lot more interest out there than it gets credit for. And you know what? I'll tell you, maybe this is my ninth house Saturn being skeptical. But I understand why people are a little kind of hesitant to cuddle up too much to astrology because, most people don't know how their microwave oven works, but they accept that it's nice and sciencey. So that's cool.
Well, I have a good retort to that. Do we have any evidence of God?
Well, he's still doing good business one way or another, so yeah, good point.
I guess he's doing good. I see a lot of churches closing around where I am, but that could be me.
Well, I think, God is diversifying and moving into new markets.
Yeah, good idea, yeah.
Because he's ahead of the ball.
Yeah, he is. He's going after the millennials next.
Yeah. It's just follow him on Instagram.
That's it. He's got his own account.
Yeah.
God at Twitter.
Yeah. So it's just I want to. There's a couple of things I want to ask you. Just we're talking astrologer to astrologer while no one else is listening, right?
Of course not.
Your way. Okay. I don't know if we're coming up to the break or not.
We are. Now we can talk. I'll just open the conversation. Yeah, get it started.
Do I want to ask the big question of you right now?
Yeah.
And this is the big question I've asked many astrologers, and I've yet to hear a satisfying answer.
Okay.
So I'm sure that if you're like me and like every other astrologer that probably at least a large majority of your clients are women.
Yes.
Why?
They are more attuned to the human psyche than men. They have a much different, more visceral, intellectual connection to the relationship to person than men do. Men are not wired that way, I don't believe, unless you've got a strong Cancer in your chart.
Oh, well, okay. And now I believe you, and I think you're right. But knowing that, why don't more men embrace the obvious strategic advantage it would give them knowing astrology?
That is because they are not as bright, as I mentioned earlier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not going to argue it.
They are operating at a different wavelength. It's sort of the whole, it's a different thing. It's just it's a conquest thing. It's just a different, we are wired differently. I don't care. We can be humans, but we have different, we've got different software. So let's put it that way. So
yeah. It's kind of, we're moving away from viewing the world that way, and yet it's still kind of.
But I will say this in comment to that if we were to embrace more of that, if we were to embrace more feminine energy, become more feminine, which I think we're on the way to being there. When that happens, we take that switch, and more women rise to power, more women take charge. We will be in a much, much better place than we are today. I firmly believe that.
So do I. So do I, and I think we're getting there. Well, it's been a lot. You may have noticed women have not been getting they've been getting kind of a raw deal for a few millennia now.
Oh, no kidding, but they're also coming to their own right now. There's a huge resurgence in movies. Movies will always lead the charge. Movies and the arts will always show where things are going. We're seeing this incredible push towards that, and I'm so excited to see it. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
I'm tired of having to be a guy.
Yeah, and I mean it doesn't just apply to men and women, but to the underrepresented voices overall.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's awesome. And please, unless you want to spend the next 30 minutes with me ranting, don't bring up Black Panther, okay? Just don't.
I'm not going to. I wasn't even going to go close to it. But I was going to say that I love the idea that there's more women in key roles. I love the fact that they're finally catching, they're getting recognized. I think that we're on the cusp. But we've got to get through some serious garbage in the drain right now before we can go on to that. But before we go into that subject, I am talking today with Matter Currie. Matthew, what is your website? Because I want to be sure you can get it right better than I can.
I have got, well, now I've got my brand new website up, and there's not much there yet, but you can contact me there. It's mcastrology.com.
Okay.
It's not really micastrology.com unless you want to think of it that way. I think I'm going to offer a happy meal.
That's the Scottish version of the
mcastrology.com, and I am the astrology blogger at BeliefNet, which is beliefnet.com/columnists/oh my stars.
Okay, very good. Sounds great. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more fun and frivolity from a couple of wild astrologers, so hang in there.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
Hi, your host, Chris Flisher here. I've been producer and host of this podcast and radio show for the past 10 years. My goal has always been to provide enlightening, progressive, and logical discussions about where we are as a species and how we move ourselves further down the road towards our greater potential. I believe astrology provides a great tool for observing our progress and awakening our consciousness to becoming a whole, better, and more complete individuals. I have sought to invite the best contemporary guests, thought leaders, and progressive minds to discuss topics that concern us all, regardless of your beliefs. Consider making a contribution through PayPal to help keep the great wheel turning so that I can continue for the next 10 years along the same enlightened path. As always, I thank you for your support.
Okay, welcome back to Turning the Wheel. We're talking today with Matter Currie. He's an astrologer out of Calgary, Canada, which holds great memories for me. And we're talking about playing nicely with others. Now, when I went to school, I was always told to play nice with others, and I thought, well, okay, I can do that. I'm a obliging kind of guy. I'm not one to rattle the cages too much. So I played nicely, but it wasn't until I really learned astrology that I became aware of the fact of the knowledge embedded there and how the connections work. It is really a mathematical construct that is incredibly accurate. And I guess in my little soapbox here, I would say that what we're trying to achieve here is not to become, you don't have to become the master astrologer of all times to predict the future or anything else, but knowing an elemental pieces of what's going on in your life due to your astrology can be incredibly helpful. So I'm talking today with Matter Currie, and we're having a great time yucking it up about relationships, which we both have had. Seems like we've both had quite a few, unfortunately. But hey, how many used cars have you had in your life? If you ask yourself that question, how many times did you move in your life?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
I lost count a while ago. I mean, don't get me wrong. Here's the thing, and I'm kind of, like with all astrologers, compatibility in relationships is a major driver of what brings people to you. And I'm really happy with my situation now, but I'll tell you, this is not one of those situations where I married my high school sweetheart and lived happily ever after for the next 50 years until something fell on me. It took work to get here. And I'm willing to bet for most people who are still looking, I still have faith in you.
yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, it took me. You're right. It's mileage logged on the damn car is what it is. You got to put the mileage in, and it really is. It's one of those things. But you just sparked an interesting question in me. Before the break, you asked me what I thought, why so many women are in astrology. What's your response to that? Was that the right response, or was that the wrong response?
Well, and I mean, it sounded right to me, and I agree with you, but then this leads to the next question, which is, when you look at people who are actually practicing astrology, there's a much closer gender split between men and women than there is among the clients.
Yeah, true. I think that's true. Yep. There's much more of a 50-50 balance, or at least 40-60.
And again, I'm a little baffled by that. I'm a little baffled by a lot of things, though, so that might not mean anything.
Yeah, it could be SEU. It's just you.
I confuse easily.
Yes, I'm right there with you. I've been confused. I was born confused. But I think the observation is worthwhile. I like making these observations because they do give you a sense of where people are going. They do show which way the school of fish is swimming. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that more women come to astrologers because more women. I think I was right when my initial answer was there about sensitivity.
Yeah,
it's about a sense of emotion. I think women are more emotionally but grounded, and men are more physically grounded.
Yeah, and I still think that if men knew more astrology, if they were more involved with it, they would. They'd get more into it because of the strategic advantage quality to it.
Oh, no kidding. But I also, I know what you're saying. But the thing of it is that I also think that this is a very slow evolutionary process. I think that takes millennia probably, or at least a couple hundred years to get through for us to sort of adapt. Now, here I am. I'm, how old am I? I'm 60. I'm going to be 66 on April 1st, everybody. Send me a birthday.
You don't look it because you got Virgo rising and you aged well.
Yeah, I don't know why I did age well, but I'm happy about it. So anybody who wants to send me a birthday card or a contribution, I'm happy to take it. April 1st. Anyway, so I'll be 66, and in that time, I have to say that I have gone from the idea of understanding relationships to the point where, I don't know, they're more of a value now because of the inquired interest. But also, I would say this, getting back to our comment about the sexes, was that in 1986, I stayed home with my twin sons and raised them for 3.5 years because they had asthma at the time, right? They had asthma, so they couldn't go to daycare. My wife had a good job, so she stayed working. I stayed home with them for 3.5 years. This was way before, there were whatever they call them, daddy, home daddies or whatever. But and I was the only guy in the playground with all the other women walking around with their kids, and I was the only guy out there, and I was raising twins. And it was a remarkable experience, eye-opening experience, extremely valuable. I wouldn't exchange it for the world, except a couple days in between there. Yeah. But it was a very intense experience, but I learned so much about what it was all about.
Wasn't that around the time there was a movie out called Mr. Mom?
Probably. This was 1986 or 89, yeah.
The entire premise was Tom Hanks is raising a baby. Oh, look, a man with a baby. That's hilarious.
Right, exactly. That was, and the Three Men and a Baby probably came out then, too. I don't know.
Right. And it's kind of like, it's funny how sometimes things slip into the popular consciousness that take root very slowly.
Right. And I guess my point behind that was that I think if every man went through that exercise at some level, went through whatever that exercise was, short of giving birth and breastfeeding, if they could go through that exercise, I think they'd have a much greater appreciation for what women have been through and are going through and have always been through all their lives.
Yeah. That, and of course, you and I are both fire signs with Cancer moons, so just as far as natural wiring goes, I suspect we might be better equipped than the average guy. In my case, I've got moon and Cancer on the ascendant, so I have to, you're breastfeeding that baby wrong. Hand him over. I'll show you how it's done. Right. Okay, it's not that bad, but
No, there's a definite strong maternal quality there. I can see it in my chart. A lot of the events in my life have been supported by that Cancer moon, and if that moon had not been in Cancer, I'm not sure I would have been able to get through it, which is interesting to say. That's a study in itself, because people who go through experiences, I had to raise 3 boys by myself because my wife passed away 17 years ago, and in that time, I had to become the mother and the father. And I tried to do the best I could at that, but I was always the one making the spaghetti and meatballs in the kitchen. I was the one taking kids to schools, taking the doctors, did it all single-handedly. It gave me an appreciation beyond belief for what women have had to endure. That's my point, I guess.
Yeah. I've been in a similar situation, and I definitely know where you're coming from.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things. I think it was challenging, there's no question about it, but I certainly grew a lot as a result. I appreciate those moments. I saw things that many people didn't see. So
Yeah, and it's I mean, something like that is part of a well-rounded experience. It's like a balanced breakfast. We should have it.
it's yours, right? You're right about that. But listen, in your experience with relationships, what has been the thing that stands out to you if you had to take a long 10,000-foot view?
Astrologically speaking, it's interesting that, and we were saying earlier that these squares give a relationship drive.
You're right.
And, you see a lot of relationships, even if you just step back from the astrology for a minute, you see a lot of relationships where you see a couple and it's like, oh, they're really nice. They really get along. Oh, they broke up. Why? No one really knows. And you see a lot of relationships where they're at each other's throats all the time. And yet no one leaves.
They're still together,
leave and
right?
Come back the next day. And they leave and come back. And it's kind of like when I'm talking to my clients sometimes about compatibility, some of the conventional wisdom is, trines and sextiles are good, oppositions and squares are bad.
Right.
And the trines and sextiles, they're easier to handle, but they're kind of lazy, I
think it breeds apathy.
Yeah. And it's like, if you've ever seen an example I sometimes use for those relationships where people are at each other's throats, but they don't break up. It's like if you've ever seen one of those nature films where they get in close up on two ants fighting.
Right.
And one ant rips the other ant's head right off, but that head keeps biting.
I love that.
That's compatibility.
That's compatibility, yeah.
These two have agreed on a goal, and they're working towards it.
It's not a long-lived one, but it's compatibility.
Oh, no, but it's
right.
It's
purpose. Well, I'm wondering, have you noticed in your observations of couples that seem to? I've noticed a lot of oppositions, couples that are opposites or have very strong oppositional quality to them. Putting in, like you say, maybe not forever mates, but putting in 20, 30-year marriages at least, getting through that much.
Yeah, and oppositions, they can be very healthy. I mean, because in astrology, opposites aren't completely different. They're sometimes more like mirror images. Sometimes
it's a variation on a theme. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, don't get me wrong, I know enough Vedic astrology to be dangerous with it. But I do know that Vedic astrology in general is a much bigger fan of the oppositions.
Oh, of course, yes.
Why that is, it's a cultural thing maybe, I don't know.
No, I think there's logic there, because I think what you're looking for in the opposition is you're looking for that which you do not have. So you find in the other person that which you need or want, or they need or want, and that's the composite quality where they become a sum of the whole as to when you're together. So an opposition theoretically should bring out the best in you and you in they, and also the worst in you and they.
Yeah. And this is one thing I tell people when they're learning astrology. Sometimes one of the most useful things you can do is if you're watching TV or you're watching a movie or whatever, and you see some celebrity who really grabs your attention, look up their chart.
Look up their chart, exactly, yeah.
And, I can't tell you, I'm a Sagittarius, I can't tell you how many times I've oh, hey, let's look at, another Gemini, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Less Geminis. The joke here is I married a Gemini once, and I almost married another one, but the thing is, if I'd married both of either one of them, it might have worked out.
Yeah, it probably would have. It would have worked out for a while, I think, I think
we just lost 1/12 of the audience. I'm sorry.
And if I start bringing my stories, I'm going to lose the other. But I had the same situation. I was with, I've had many Libra girlfriends in my life, and I did really well with them, and I got along with them. And there was a certain thing about them I appreciated, but I always wanted something more. I have Mars and Scorpio, by the way, just so you know. So I had a different sense of drive, perhaps was the word for it, whatever. And I ended up with more Scorpios in my life than any other woman that I had dated or was with. I just think it's kind of unusual.
Yeah. And while we're at it, let's throw a shout out to the Libras here, because
we love you, Libras.
If you throw out the stock description, they seem kind of like, I'll put it to you this way. I think that a Libra can just be at least as goal-oriented and unstoppable about it as anyone else. They're kind of usually nicer about it.
They're much quieter. They're much more sedate. They're much more aesthetically appealing. They're not like the Ram that just plows ahead without. They're a little bit more reflective, which is the good quality.
They're better at making you think it was your idea that you do. things
I
their way.
agree. Yeah, and they always have their hand on the emergency brake, and
Yeah.
I found many times with people who are especially Libras is that they are so good at being equal that they become paralyzed by being too equal. So
Yeah.
they go to bed saying so and so is right. They wake up in the morning, so and so is wrong, or vice versa. So there's that duality of this disparity going back and forth of trying to be wishy-washy. Sometimes I don't mean that in a disparaging way. It just means that they're chewing on both sides of the breadstick.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why that came from, but that's what it came from. So,
I think, do we need to run down the list and find out if there's any signs we have possibly offended but then said nice things about? I don't know.
probably we haven't said it. Well, I mean, this is part of the allure of astrology, I think, because when people hear a characteristic spoken about in this way, it becomes quite engaging. I actually hired a musician. His name was Francis Dunnery. I'm not very sure if you heard of him, but anyway,
That's familiar.
yeah, he wrote a song called "Too Much Saturn" years ago, and
Oh.
yeah, a very interesting guy from Scotland, big, huge, burly, looks like a rugby player. And he comes and he sings his songs, but he does an astrology show at the same time because he does astrology. And
Oh.
it's fascinating. So he stands in front of an audience, 100 people, 200 people, and he says, Sagittarians, raise your hand. Geminis, raise your hand, or whatever. And then he starts cracking jokes in between songs as sort of his filler
Right on.
between. And it's a
Right.
great, everybody loves it. They walk out of there totally engaged.
We need to find this guy and get him his own show.
Well, he would probably want to sing. He really wants to be a musician, but he loves astrology at the same time. So it's kind of fun, I think, to have that. I had him at a house concert at my house years ago.
Right on.
Really good time. It was really fun. He's a very, very interesting guy, and just had it together. Strong. It was a Capricorn, if I recall. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I don't know about you, but I don't remember people's names, but I remember their signs.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing is, how they say men don't remember like birthdays and anniversaries?
Right.
Neither do I, but once I see the birth chart, it's like, oh, I remember this chart.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah,
And
I don't
that's
remember.
what
I don't remember birthdays, and I remember certain days. I don't remember birthdays per se of people, but I do remember what they are. So if I run into one of my clients at the supermarket, I say, "Oh, there she is. She's the the late Pisces. I know who she is."
Yeah, or it's sort of like, when now that the sun has entered Aries, it's like, okay, I know there are certain birth dates I need to check out.
Exactly, and that's a very handy thing to know that. So people are not easily. People are very pleasantly happy to hear that information come from you because it shows that you've remembered them. And it's kind of hard for us. I think those of us who are in astrology came from a certain era where we were blessed with this. I think it's a certain Uranian Neptunian connection that we have that brings us into the realm where this actually plays out very, very nicely. And the real logic of the universe and the logic of our timing and the logic of our lives, who we meet, who we are with, all begins to make sense. It's like a gigantic puzzle. I just love it.
Yeah, and it's I do think slowly. Well, okay, here's the thing. The internet came along and people were thinking that, oh, we'll be more connected and thus more wise. Okay, maybe not working out that way so far, but I still hold out faith for humanity. And I do think that astrology really is, it's a valuable, you know what, here's the thing. Talking about the internet, talking about Facebook, I know that there are people on there that I've gotten to know, I've done readings for, and they are people who, how the internet is.
I do.
They vote one way and I would vote another, and under different circumstances I would have never had the chance to realize that they are actually good and decent human beings.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
no one getting into the politics here.
Yeah,
That's it.
no, I know. I've done many shows about politics. Trust me,
Yeah.
I've done a lot. But one interesting little vignette from my standpoint was that I used to have a radio show out of on Contact Talk Radio years ago, and that was broadcast across the globe and locally as well. And I had a very wide audience, and I do miss those days because I used to do a whole half of my show would be just call-ins. But of course, call-ins are quick. You get people calling in, all they want is a free reading, and you get nowhere. No one follows up with a reading, believe it or not. And so as a result, you're just giving away free stuff. And I just said it's just too hard for me to keep up, and I was paying for it, so I stopped. But in the course of that time, I would have days where I would open up the phone lines, and I'd get calls on the West Coast from somebody who had an incredibly powerful Leo, and then on somebody on the East Coast with almost exactly the same thing, but in Aquarius. And I'm like, wow, And I had them on the same show within the same half hour. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to put you in touch with so-and-so. You guys are both going through the same thing, very similar situation. You'd be great for each other. Those kinds of situations I thought were really, really fun.
Yeah, and I've got a story I could tell you. Would you like me to?
Tell me, right. Rattle on.
There are two people in the world, in human history, I think, who have maybe saved more lives than anyone else. One of them's a multiple Leo, and one of them's a multiple Aquarius.
Huh.
The multiple Leo is Henrietta Lacks, who is the source of the HeLa, H-E-L-A. It's an immortal cell line that's used in laboratory research.
Uh-huh.
She died of uterine cancer, but there are cells all over the world of her still alive today that are still developing important medicines, saving millions of lives. And the other one is a multiple Aquarius, and he's one of my all-time favorite human beings, is a guy named Vasily Arkhipov.
Don't know either of them. Wow.
He long story short, Cuban Missile Crisis, he's the first officer on a submarine. The captain and the political officer decided it was time to launch the nukes. Vasily Arkhipov said no.
Huh. Well, I'm glad he was. Hope we have one of those today.
and that's my story about why the Leo Aquarius polarity is awesome.
It's a great polarity largely because the Leo is such a commanding presence. Their charisma is outstanding. You can't help but love them and follow them. And then the Aquarian piece of it is this great community builder, sort of let's do what's right for the world kind of capacity. I always defer to Franklin Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln as my two favorite Aquarians because they just did so much great stuff at the right time. It's like, why don't we get one of those today? Where are you? Come on. We're waiting for you. If you're listening, please step forward and register to vote and get yourself on the ballot.
Please.
We're begging. We're begging.
Yeah.
I'll pay you. I'll send you some contributions.
Yeah.
We really need someone like that. But anyway, you're right. Those are the people that we would need. And of course, I always think of, and I think when I think of the Leos, I think of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama as the people they had that certain same quality about them. Maybe not Bill Clinton so much, but I know that Barack Obama had a great deal of integrity. I've read a lot about him, heard a lot about him. Very high moral value, integrity. I mean, it's just such a departure from where we are today that makes your head spin.
Well, say what you will, whether or not you disagree with his politics, he never paid hush money to a porn star. Oh, God, we were supposed to avoid talking about politics. What's gone wrong?
No, we aren't. We can talk about politics anytime we want.
Everyone just skip what I said.
But to see the it's okay. We can talk about this anytime we want. I've done many shows about this, and it's a great topic because it's so relevant. What I love about it, believe it or not, is that this astrology totally supports where we are. And my view of this, where we are now, is that if we did not have this thing in the White House now, we would not move. But because it is there, we are generating enormous activity on the ground. The movements that are rising, the people that are frustrated. That is a game changer, which will come back and kiss us instead of slapping us.
I think you're right. So let's all be grateful.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's just kind of like going to the dentist. No one wants to go to the dentist, but when you go and you get your teeth cleaned, you come out, you feel great, and you've done the right thing. It's not fun while you're there. Like anything, any challenge in life is not fun. It's not fun paying taxes or anything else you have to do. But when you're there and you do it, you realize how great it is. This is getting back to my idea of the duality. The duality of life is there because without that damn drill or tooth cleaner, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's important.
Yeah. It's that one thing in the fridge that's starting to stink that makes you clean it out.
That's right. And I've had many science experiments in my fridges over the years. As you can imagine, with 3 boys,
Yeah.
Lots of experiments. In every appliance in my house, I've had experiments of some sort. But that's okay. We don't have to go there. But it's interesting to note that the whole thing about relationships and astrology, why they're so valuable, I often defer to the elements more than anything else because I find that there's a certain it just works. I mean, I've had girlfriends who have been air signs, and it worked very well for me. I've had one of my best relationships was a Sagittarius, believe it or not.
Oh my God, we picked on every other sign. Why not? I can't tell you how many female clients I've had who said, "Oh yeah, I was in a relationship with a Sag man once. It was a lot of fun." Well, it lasted.
Wow, it lasted, right? And then they were up and gone.
Wandered off. I tell people, honest to God, I at one point I had a thing on TV a long time ago where I was a dog astrologer, and I know this sounds nuts to some people. Dogs have birth charts too, and I'm telling you, if you adopt a Sagittarius dog, you either need a really good fence or you need to get used to him running off. He'll probably come back.
Yeah,
but they wander.
Yeah, they do wander. And I, interestingly enough, after this is a great story in a way. After my my wife passed away, I got my youngest son a dog. He was 9 years old at the time. And so what could be a better time to get a young boy a dog than 9 years old after he lost his mother? So I go out and I get a dog, and the dog is a Cancer dog. And the dog comes in, and he is just Mr. Mush, and this kid loves him. And it was the most healing, restorative connection I've ever had with an animal in my life. It just made so many things better that could have been worse, because there was always this person, there was always this animal that was there for distraction. It was there for love. It was just the perfect thing to do. And I didn't pre-think it. I just did it very impulsively. That's me as an Aries, of course.
But it worked.
It worked. It worked wonderfully. And this dog was a wonderful dog and filled a valuable role in our family as a result. I think it couldn't have happened without him. So, and he was the right dog at the right time. So I think being a pet astrologer is actually very useful. It
is. And I like dogs.
And you're in a very select niche. I don't think you got much competition there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, it's very rare that a dog wants a reading.
That's true. That's true. But at least you know how to approach them. You know, if you're approaching a Taurus dog, you might want to have a piece of hamburger in your back pocket.
Yeah. Or if you're approaching a Cancer dog, seem a little sad and needy. Why not? It might work.
Yeah. A little scratch behind the ears will help them a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and but I mean, this is true. This is what amazes me about astrology, and this is what I try to impart in my own personal enthusiasm to people, is that this is so much greater than you think. Now, granted, you and I probably have studied far more than the average person about this stuff, which is fine. That's our own personal obsession. But my viewpoint, my soapbox speech is to say to people, learn more about astrology, get to know your birth charts, get your birthplace, birth date, birth time, know where your planets are, follow the transits in a very simple way. You'll be amazed at how the pieces in your life's puzzle click into place.
Absolutely. And it's the more you know about it, the more you'll suddenly realize, hey, this stuff works. It's crazy, but it works.
It's crazy, but it works, and you'll be addicted. You'll be pulled in without any question. You'll be pulled in. So
there you go.
So let me ask you one more question before we sign off here. What is the thing that you what is it about relationships that drew you to astrology? Was it because you were, or is that what drew you to astrology?
I just kind of wandered into astrology at an early age because, long story short, Dad was a skeptic about everything. Mom ran around behind his back reading tea leaves, and she got a hold of a book called The Complete Astrologer, which is still...
Oh, yeah, I know that book.
And she handed this thing to me when I was about 7 years old and said, there's too much math. But I started looking through it and, whoa, okay, that sounds like me. When's my date of birth? And I started calculating charts. I've got moon in what? Oh, that applies. Okay. And it went from there. And then eventually I got tired of working for a company and said, to hell with this. I'm going to go be an astrologer.
Yeah. It is a self-driven occupation. There's no question about it. Once you get that bug, you're not going to let it go. I had a very similar situation. Believe it or not, my father was a minister and totally hated astrology. Oh. And so because I have Saturn opposing Sun, I had to fight against him. Yeah. I went and said, okay, I'm going to do exactly the opposite of what he did. He was bald. I grew my hair. He was a minister. I'm going to be an astrologer. So yeah.
Same here. I totally have metal hair right now because my dad was bald as a cue ball.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I've got the same problem.
Right on.
What are you going to do? We are products of our culture. We can't help it.
Yeah.
I'm going to wear my freak flag high.
Yeah.
Let my freak flag fly. Anyway, right. Matthew, it's been great talking to you today. We had a good time today chatting. Hopefully got around to things that made sense to people. I think they do, because I think ultimately relationships are what holds us all together. We're always going to be in relationship. I think relationship in itself, just the nature of the word, is what makes it to be human. That's what it is to be human. We have to be in relationship, whether it's to our houses, to our careers, to our mortgages, to our priests, to our lovers. We are in relationship with everything and everybody. So it's a valuable topic to talk about.
Absolutely. Oh, and one more thing.
Yeah.
Go to mcastrology.com. You'll find my contact information. Drop me a line. I'll send you my free ebook, 12 Signs of...
There you go. See, that is he. Think of him as the Scottish astrologer, mixtrologer.
Or the one who will completely ruin your cholesterol levels. I'm not sure.
Wow. I'm curious how you do that. But anyway, great talking to you today, and thanks so much for coming on the show, and we'll get you back on. We'll have some more fun.
Right on.
All right. Good enough.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.